the same about it. What was the nickname we used to give that Hunter F6?
Yeah, they called it the GT6.
Yes, that's right. I always loved that.
The course went well, Nick, to come back to your comment. But there was a rather unfortunate part in that course, and it was completely self-imposed. Because I had been so successful at leaning, my competitive spirit rose up with horns on it, and I was going to sweep the floor, as it were, at Valley. And bottom line, I applied myself too hard. Absolutely, I drove myself too hard. And when you do that, there comes a point where the body says, well, that's it, enough is enough. And to cut a long story short, I had what was essentially a nervous breakdown. Totally unexpected, came from left field. Maren, bless her, of course, didn't know what on earth was happening. I was taken off flying, told to, go back to our little place, which was in remote Anglesey, and recover. And I forget how long it took, but I did. And back into it, picking up on the course. And I did.
Well, that's interesting. They just sent you home and said, recover. And nowadays, of course, things would be treated very differently, but perhaps not back then.
My memory is getting a little hazy, Nick. I have no doubt. I do recall seeing a doctor. I do remember that bit. And indeed, he might have given me some medication to help me. I really cannot remember. But the flying, initially, naturally coming back from such a setback was really, really tough, very tough. But I managed to win the aerobatics prize. I managed overall to get the Cup of Honor at the end of the course, which was very pleasing, but a very, very salutary lesson, a hard one to learn.
Absolutely, yes. And in these days of our concern about our mental state, a great lesson for you, because I've no doubt that sort of held you in good stead in the future.
Sure, absolutely.
So from RAF Valley, and you're basically learning to become a pure pilot, we're now moving on to weaponeering and how to use an aircraft as a weapon of war. And what happened next?
Well, yes, in the training sequence, that would have been the next thing that would have followed. But the problem was, at the time, there was a very significant backlog of pilots. And this led to considerable personnel management problems, because here we were, this bunch of pilots passed out from advanced flying training, feeling very sharp and ready for the next stage. And suddenly the brakes come on totally, and people got posted to all sorts of interesting little positions, which were frankly not of much help towards Chivener in the tactical weapons, that's for sure. And I thought, what will I do? I know, gliding. I know, because that'd been on the back burner naturally through all of BFTS, and indeed all through Valley and Shrewsbury, Shawbury, all of that. I wasn't gliding, so I've got to get back into gliding. So I rang up the chief flying instructor at Bicester, who was a legendary character by the name of Andy Goff, a flight sergeant, became warrant officer. Very powerful man, strong man, and he said, leave it to me. So, I knew it was a done deal when Andy said, leave it to me.
I love it. I love that a flight sergeant managed to get you a special posting for your holding tour.
No problem to Andy. He had friends in very high places who listened to him. Brilliant. And he arranged it. And I went back to the RAF Gliding Centre where I started. And I was there for a year, running courses, doing a lot of tugging on the Chipmunk. During that year, I flew my first ever gliding competition, which I managed to win, which was one, and that was another hook that then sunk in. So it was a wonderful year in many ways, but a very tiring year, very tiring. I was wiped out by the end of it, that's for sure. From there, went to do some refresher flying on the Jet Provost, Manby, I believe that was at. And that was okay for what it was, but it really didn't prepare me. And it didn't prepare me for what was to come. You can almost use the word shock, going from that flying training Jet Provost environment into the Hunter, where although they were prepared to give you a little slack in view of the holding period, it wasn't going to be much. And I know that more than one very good pilot was lost through the system because they just couldn't cope with what they were faced with, because the flying at Chivna was extremely challenging, straight into the really heavy stuff. Cine tracking, air-to-air tracking, you know, formation flying, and of course the weaponeering itself. Again, I loved the Hunter, absolutely loved it. I had some good instructors, very hard, but good. And the weaponeering, I absolutely adored. I just loved it, loved weaponeering. The Hunter, of course, had the 30mm cannon, and we had practice bombs for dive bombing. We did retard bombing and rockets. So the weaponeering I adored, and managed to get over that initial major obstacle, and then the performance started coming again. So got through all of that quite well. And from then on, it was a matter of being allocated as to where people were going to go. And I learned that I was going to be posted to 228 OCU at Coningsby for the Phantom. And
I'm curious, did you actually have a desire to go and fly a particular airplane, or did that come as a very pleasant surprise?
It came as a very pleasant surprise, Nick, but within me, I wanted to fly fighters. Yes, I wanted to fly fast jet, definitely. So to go on the Phantom, I was delighted. I really was, over the moon.
Excellent, excellent. So off up to Coningsby for the conversion to fly the Phantom. What was that like?
Hard. It's very hard. It was a big wake-up call from the Hunter, I must say, because as you know, Nick, having flown the Phantom so much, it was not an aircraft that just flew on rails. You had to be with it, on top of it, all the time. And it was a very physically, of course, a much larger aircraft than the Hunter. But it had, and one had to get used to the two-man crew concept. But it was once I got the measure of it, I thought, what a magnificent machine, magnificent, it really was. And the handling, although a long way short of perfect, once you got its measure, it did a great job. And it was a rugged machine, of course, great machine in terms of survivability going to war. And that was very classically demonstrated in Vietnam, of course. And here we are, this aircraft, which the very first flight was in 1958. And I gather it's still in service in a small number of air forces, Greece, Turkey, Japan, for example. Remarkable. The weapon systems were very, very basic, very crude, really. So one relied very much on what we call seaman's eye.
So, George, the role of the Phantom then was quite a multi-role aircraft, recce, air to ground, as well as air defence. Did you practice all those arts?